Hi, I'm Charlotte, and this video is created in compliance to Management 218 International Marketing. This presentation is a discussion of the research study entitled Economic Impacts of the US-China Trade War on the Asian Economy and Applied Analysis of IDE GSM, which was conducted by Satoru Kumagai, Toshitaka Goken, Kenmei Chobata, Ikomo Isuno, and Kazanobu Hayakawa, published on April 2019. The United States and China are the two biggest economies in the world in terms of nominal gross domestic products in US dollars since 2010 and consist of 39% of world GDP in 2017. The US is the biggest export market for China, consisting of 19% of total exports in 2017, while China is the third largest export market for the US, following Canada and Mexico, consisting of 9% of total exports. The trade war between US and China began when President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on 818 Chinese goods valued at 34 billion US dollars, effective July 1, 2018. China soon retaliated by imposing a 25% tariff on 545 US goods valued at 34 billion US dollars. It is unprecedented that the two biggest economies in the world have imposed import tariffs on each other on the global stage, clearly intending to harm the other. Numerous news articles have been published on this matter, most of which condemn both countries for damaging the global economy by discouraging world trade. The methodology of the study. The geographical simulation model developed by IDE JETRO is a variation of the computable general equilibrium model based on spatial economics. IDE GSM has been developed with two primary objectives. First is to simulate the dynamics of the locations of populations and industries in East Asia over the long term, and second, to analyze the economic impacts of trade and transport facilitation measures, such as developing the transport infrastructure and reducing time and cost of national borders on regional economies at a subnational level. There are two endowments: labor, which is mobile within a country but prohibited from migrating to other countries, and land, which is unequally spread in all regions and is jointly owned by all labor of each region. The trade balance between China and US by 2017 was composed by five stages of production: the primary commodities, capital goods, consumption goods, parts and components, and processed goods. It is obvious that China records a huge trade surplus against the US, and most of it comes from capital goods and consumption goods. China's export to the US are mainly goods that are directly consumed by consumers, while most US exports to China are mainly goods that are consumed by producers. The scenario and results. In this study, the researchers formulate the US-China trade war as the case wherein both countries impose 25% tariffs on all the imports from each other. In other words, it is a trade war's worst-case scenario. The researchers assume that the tariffs remain the same during 2019 to 2021, and economic impacts are estimated at the end of 2021 compared to the baseline scenario. It must be noted that an additional government expenditure from tariff revenues for the US and Chinese governments are not considered in the model. Further, the researchers run another scenario, which is a trade war between the US and the world, wherein they assume a 10% increase in bilateral tariff rates between the US and all the other countries in the world. The scenario is intended at identifying the consequence if the US applies its offensive trade policy against all other countries after China. This table shows the economic impacts from the US-China trade war at the end of 2021 compared to the baseline scenario. For the US, the economic impact is negative 0.4%, while for China, it is negative 0.5%. In contrast, the economic impact on the global economy is relatively small, negative 0.1%. Thus, some Asian countries actually benefit from the trade war. The one that gains the most is Singapore, by positive 0.7% of GDP, followed by Malaysia, positive 0.5%, Taiwan, positive 0.4%, and Korea, positive 0.3%. This table shows 5 states or provinces that are most negatively affected by the trade war. For US states, the state worst hit by the trade war is California, followed by Texas and Massachusetts. For Chinese provinces, Shenzhen suffers the most, followed by Guangzhou and Fujian. The negative impact for Shenzhen province is 3.3% of the GDP, which is much higher than 0.5% of the GDP for China at the national level. Analysis and policy implications. The simulation results revealed that economic impacts from the full trade war between the G2 economies are significant for both the countries. Negative impacts for the US and China are negative 0.4% and negative 0.5% of their GDPs, respectively. Thus, considering that the IMF estimation of the GDP growth rates for the US and China in 2021 are 1.7% and 6.0% respectively, these negative impacts are fairly large for both the countries. Furthermore, negative impacts to the E&E sector in the G2 countries are much larger in terms of percentage, which losses 12.4% in the US and 7.5% in China. In conclusion, the researchers estimated the economic impacts of the US-China trade war through the trade channel using IDE GSM. Accordingly, few publications have revealed numerical economic impacts from the trade war. Thus far, not only for the US and China, but also for other countries. Thus, this study will be valuable for researchers as well as for policy and decision makers. Considering only economic impacts through trade channels, the trade war is harmful for both the US and China, although it is not likely to lead the global economy to another Great Depression. It is practically inappropriate to brand the trade war as the primary cause of a potential slowdown in the G2 countries and or the global economy without conducting any calculations based on economic models. Some industries in some countries may benefit from the trade war owing to the trade diversion effect. In fact, there are news reports stating that some firms have changed their procurement from China or the US to other countries for exports to China or the US. However, this potential benefit to other countries is not likely to be fully explored because it is highly uncertain as to how much longer this trade war will continue. As far as the trade war remains bilateral, it is an issue only for the concerned parties. However, it will be a completely different scenario if a trade war would involve third-party countries. Thus, the world cannot afford to engage in a multilateral trade war. The end. Thank you for watching.